As a transgender man of color, Tiq Milan has been pushing back on stereotypes for most of his life. With his wife, Kim, they travel across North America, talking to people about how to think differently about love, marriage, and gender. We're pleased to bring Tiq Milan to our studio tonight to talk about his work and one of the most challenging topics he deals with, masculinity. Welcome, Tiq.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to finally meet you.
Yes, yes.
Kim was supposed to be here with us, but
yes.
she's not.
Yes.
But it's really great to just have a conversation with you.
Awesome.
When did you first realize you were transgender?
When did I first realize I was trans? It was an evolution for me. Right now I'm working on a book. It's called Man of My Design, and I've been thinking about like how I've kind of been on the gender spectrum in so many different places. So I think, I was always a tomboy growing up, always had a masculinity to me, but I didn't have the language or like the culture to know that like trans people existed. And so it wasn't until I was really into like this very like masculine, like lesbian identity, and I was living in New York City and I met trans men, and I didn't even know that trans men existed. I didn't even know that was a thing. So when I first met my first trans guy was when it kind of clicked that this was possible for me. And that's why for me it's so important to be visible, because it's like I am a model of possibility for so many people, and somebody had to model that possibility for me in order for me to know that I could actually exist in the world as my most authentic self. So I don't think that didn't happen until like maybe like my early 20s.
Early 20s.
Yeah,
That's a long time. When you had that realization, how did you personally feel? Because I'm thinking it must have been like a load off your shoulders.
Yeah, it was a load off. It was just like it was like an aha moment. It was like a light. Like literally, it was like ha ha.
Yeah.
When I first met my first
Isn't it cool
guy.
that Oprah created that word?
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
Yeah, it's so real. It's so real. It was really like that when I first met this trans guy, and I was a bartender, and he came in to do a fundraiser for his top surgery. And I was like, "What is a top surgery? What are you talking about?" And the language we were using there was like, "Oh, he used to be a girl," and I was like, "Oh my God, we can actually do this." So I was really excited, and I was scared because I was still trying to figure out like emotionally and like mentally like what that meant, like what the challenges were going to be for me going forward with this, and how my family and friends and community were going to react to me, really becoming like a different person. So,
and what was their reaction when you? I guess is it called coming out? Or?
Yeah. It was a coming out. I guess it was my second coming out. Because I came out as gay when I was like 14, and then I came out as trans when I was in my early 20s. I think with my family there was some confusion. People. It's different when you come out as far as your sexuality. But gender is something that people have thought about as something that is unmovable. It's something that is very strict, kind of rigid, kind of binary system. So saying that I am a man now, even though I was assigned female at birth, I think kind of threw people for a loop. But I have a really loving family, so they really took the journey with me. And I really approached it with understanding that I'm transitioning, but everybody had to transition with me, right? So I went from being the little sister to the baby brother, from the favorite auntie to the favorite uncle, saying from a daughter to a son. And I had to really create space for my family to make that transition with me. So it was a process. There was a lot of patience. There were a lot of hard conversations. But at the end of the day, they love me exactly as I am, and it's great.
And your mom played a big role in that. I know she's passed away since.
Yes. My mother passed away 3 years ago. She died of cancer 3 years ago. But my mother really was my rock. She was my champion, and she was the one. She was my ally. So she was the one that was like, this is my child, and I may not understand him, and I may not understand this whole trans thing, but we are going to love him, and we're going to respect him. And she set up very strict boundaries.
And she called you by the pronoun that you wanted.
It took some time, but I had to set boundaries with her too, because there was a time when she just couldn't get it together. She just kept sheing me to death, okay? And she kept using the wrong name, and I was like, Mommy, I love you, but if you keep doing this to me, I'm going to have to take a step back from our relationship.
There's been a lot of debate about pronouns. What do you think? Where do you stand with that?
How do you mean? Like
in the sense that it should just be the pronoun that you're born with.
Right.
And not the one that you want to be called.
Right. You see me here. I don't know if it would make sense for me to say she. I think pronouns belong to the individual, not to the person who's talking to them. You know what I'm saying? So my pronouns is a part of my identity. It's a part of who I am in this world. So if I say that my name is Tiq and my pronouns are he, then I would expect everyone to respect that, just like we would do with anybody else. So I don't think there shouldn't really be a lot of room for debate there. We shouldn't be debating other people's identity and how other people want to be treated and how other people want to be respected.
You and your wife Kim Kim gave this incredible TED Talk. And in the TED Talk, you said that on your birth certificate, it said F, which should have been false.
Yes.
It was such a compelling talk between the two of you. What was it like coming together to do that talk? We're going to show a clip in a second.
Oh, great. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, writing that talk was a lot. You know, we worked. I think that's one of the things I worked the hardest on.
Because it's on a very public stage, right?
Yeah, it was a very public stage. You know, we wrote it for months. We had lots of arguments about it because it was, we really dug deep, and we really had to tell our story from a really deep and truthful place. And sometimes that caused some friction between us, but you know, we came out of it, closer than ever. But being on that stage was nerve-wracking because, what they don't tell you about TED is there's no teleprompters. You have to memorize that word for word. And the night before, we didn't have it memorized, and we had to run through it. We were like, oh my God, we're gonna bomb so bad. So that whole day, we didn't even speak to each other. All we did was do that TED Talk over and over. We were walking down the street during the TED Talk. We were at dinner just doing it. I was in the shower and she was doing her makeup and we're doing it. So we did it over and over and over again till it just flowed out of us. But it was a great experience.
But it's also very important because earlier on you were saying about someone to model after. This is a relationship that you don't normally see celebrated in that way.
Right, exactly.
Did you realize the impact that it would have for other people watching it?
Absolutely, and that was, the work that we do, we want it to be impactful. That's why we're so passionate about it, and it was important for us to model showing that a Black, queer, and trans couple, exist in the world, and it exists in the world in a way that is monogamous and that is loving, and that is fruitful for everybody else. And it's not just a model for other people of color or for trans or for queer people. It's us modeling what authentic, loving relationships can look like for anyone,
regardless of gender.
Regardless of gender.
All right, let's show a clip of the TED Talk with Tiq Milan and Tiq.
Awesome.
Both poets, writers, creatives with a long history of community work behind us and big, huge dreams of a family in front of us. We shared a lot of things in common, but we were also incredibly different. I've been a lifelong traveler and a bit of an orphan, whereas he comes from a huge family and definitely stays grounded. I often kind of sum up the differences in our strengths by saying, keep me safe and I'll keep you wild.
I love that saying.
Yeah.
I love it. You seem really comfortable on the stage. I don't think anyone would think, oh, they just did that last night.
Yeah. Scared out of my mind.
And there's a great story that you share in the TED Talk about how the two of you met. How did you meet?
Okay, so Kim and I met on Facebook. She was a friend of a friend. You know how you have friends lists, and sometimes I'll go to another friend's list and see. And I was like, oh, she's so cute.
You would creep on other people's
friends? Yeah, I'm a creeper, So I was like, oh my God, this woman is so cute. So I reached out to her and I just said, hey, what's up? And she didn't respond. So I would send her a message once a month for 5 months, and I was just saying, hey, how you doing? And she finally responded. And then when she finally responded, we talked for 24 hours a day. We had 3,000 Facebook messages between us in 3 days, and then after 2 weeks, I asked her to marry me, and we hadn't even seen each other in person. I hadn't even heard her voice, and I hadn't talked to her on her phone or anything. And I was like, I think I want to be with you forever.
So what was it about her? I mean, you hadn't seen her. I mean, you saw pictures,
I saw
obviously.
Pictures of her.
She's gorgeous.
I saw pictures. Yeah, she's hot. Number one. Well, not number one, but she's hot. And she's just so brilliant, and so passionate. And she just has a level of compassion for people and for the world that I hadn't seen before. She takes her work very, very seriously, and Kim really wants to see this world be more loving and inclusive for everybody. And I really loved that about her. It was how can I not want somebody like this to be in my life forever?
Oh, it's such a nice story. I would like to show another clip.
Yeah,
and this one is from a web series called Ask a Black Man, and you're all discussing on whether it's okay to compliment a woman in the street.
Well, she's walking down the street and she flashes that ring. She says she's married and you leave her alone. Now, my wife literally, it's not gonna happen. And it's mess, and it bothers me, yo. So my wife, she can't even leave the house. Yeah, it bothers me that people don't respect the fact that she
compliment.
No, don't compliment my wife. If she tell you she married, she's not there for you. No, real talk. It's not for your gaze. Every woman is not for all of us.
Now
she's not for you. You know what I mean? She's not for you. She's for me, and she's for herself.
Does that reaction surprise you?
No. Not at all. You know, I've gotten into debates with so many non-trans men around, you know, respecting a woman's autonomy and understanding a woman doesn't owe you anything. You are not entitled to a woman's smile, to her time, to her body, to her presence. You know, she's not for you. You know, if a woman is just walking to the laundromat or to church or to the grocery store, leave her alone. You know, if she looks good, that's great, but it's not for you. And I think for me as a trans man, as someone who's had to cultivate my masculinity in a particular way and wasn't born into this manhood and wasn't born into this idea of being entitled, particularly being entitled to women or feminine folks, I constantly get this pushback with men, you know? And that's why, you know, I'm really passionate about my work and really invested in expanding our ideas around masculinity and manhood so that it's more inclusive of allowing women to be their most authentic and autonomous self and to be safe. You know, women feel unsafe around men, and that's not right. And we treat it like it just naturally is, like boys will be boys and this is just what men do. No, it's not right that women have to clutch their purses at night, or we have to teach women that they have to hold their keys in between their knuckles, you know, when they're walking to their cars. It shouldn't be like that. A woman should feel safe, and we should be the ones making women feel safe and not scaring them out of their minds.
I'm wondering, did you make a conscious effort to investigate the kind of masculinity you were moving into once you transitioned?
Absolutely, because you know, becoming a man, I was looking for tropes of masculinity. I was looking at models of possibility to model my masculinity after. Like I have my dad, who's an amazing guy, you know, but I was also looking in other places, and I wasn't seeing anything. What I was seeing the masculinity that I didn't want. You know, so I had to really take deliberate efforts to look at tropes of masculinity and say, this is something that I don't want to be a part of. This is something I don't want to be a part of. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of the things that I've seen in masculinity that has been modeled by non-transgender heterosexual men is something I do not want to be a part of. So this is about me creating a new type of masculinity for myself that feels good.
What does the word masculine mean to you? How would you describe it?
Oh, you know, I think, and that's the thing, like I think oftentimes we say that masculinity is about being strong and being a provider, but isn't femininity being strong and being a provider?
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay. Aren't there so many women who are providers and who are strong? So it's like, but you know, we have to like expand this idea of masculinity. So masculinity is being strong and being a provider, but it's also being compassionate. It's also being soft, and it's also being emotionally available and emotionally intelligent, and understanding that those things are not antithetical to being a man, you know? And it's about me being a better man, but you know, I'm also trying to model this for like non-trans and heterosexual men. Like, you know, you can be a better man. You can expand this idea of what it means to be masculine in yourself and not have these little rigid little boxes, because I think that kind of repression, you know, I think it causes violence. I think it causes depression. You know, we have to understand, like, you know, the cause.
Depression for men.
Yeah, depression for men. Depression for men and violence for men. You know, there's been, you know, I remember reading this story about this man, this 40-year-old black man who loved to dance. He's like, I love to dance. I love to dance. But he found himself like going to like hip hop concerts where it was mostly men, and he wanted to like be free in his body, but he would be criticized because he's a man of size. So he would go to like electric dance music, EDM music. He would go to like those kind of concerts where there was a larger crowd, a more eclectic crowd, and people of different genders, or even going to queer places where he can move in his body. And it's like, you know, we shouldn't put those type of restrictions on men, you know, because it causes like this disconnect to our humanity, right? I think, you know, oftentimes we tell men that the only emotion that we are allowed to have that's valid is like anger or lust, right? But is that not taken away from the complexity of our humanity? Isn't that not taking away like our human existence by telling men that they can't have a full range of emotion? You know, so I'm really interested in, you know, bridging that gap.
I think it's really interesting what you said. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. My daughter already understands or insists that pink is for girls, blue is for boys.
Right.
Now, if I try to put blue on my son, he's like, no. If I try to put pink on him, he's like, pink is for girls. And it's not because that's how I raised him. And I'm wondering, as a society, do we need to interrogate what masculine is?
Absolutely. We absolutely have to interrogate masculinity. We're constantly interrogating and criticizing femininity and women. You know, we have to create space to start to interrogate masculinity and make it more expansive so that people can be more free. Pink is a color, and blue is a color.
And apparently pink was created for boys.
It was, right, back in the day, right? Yeah, it's just a color, right? And it's just not fair to our young people. And you're right, it's not about the household. You know, you have your children, but you can't protect them from all of the other messages that they are getting about themselves. themselves, about their gender, about their race, about where they live. You know, this is something that we have to constantly be like, you know, interjecting and disrupting, you know?
And do you feel a responsibility as a trans man to advocate?
I do. I feel a responsibility as a trans man to advocate because that's the responsibility that I've chosen. I don't think every trans person does, and I know a lot of trans people who grapple with this, like this idea of feeling like they have to be an advocate. We have some trans people who just, you know, they just want to be construction workers or nurses or, you know, housewives or house husbands or whatever.
Because that's not it's not an expectation that you have for people, like if regular.
No,
straight person.
Exactly. I don't expect every other person
not
to
regular
advocate.
in the sense that it's regular, but you know what I mean.
I feel what you're saying. Yeah, but you know, I don't have an expectation of anybody to advocate for like their identity, however marginalized or intersectional it may be. But I personally, knowing that I do this work and I've chosen to do this work and I've stepped into this spotlight and I've said I'm going to be a leader in the community and I'm going to advocate, you know, for my people, then absolutely. And you know, I'm going to do it, you know, forever.
What kind of feedback do you get?
I really get a lot of great feedback, really. I think most of the feedback I get is really good, particularly in community. A lot of women, the worst feedback I get, honestly, is from like non-trans heterosexual men. You know, and I think it just comes from a place of insecurities. Like, how can you call yourself a man in the world and be this way? Men don't do this. Men don't talk like this. Well, I'm a man and I do. And maybe you should too. And just, you know, free yourself a little bit. You know, but for the most part, the feedback that I get is really good. And for the haters, I kind of just have to brush it off because I know that it's something that comes with the territory.
How do you do that though? If you're doing this work in a climate where there's so much, you know, everybody has something to say on social media. We talked about depression earlier. How do your work, the work that you do, you're very vulnerable. You have to be very vulnerable.
Definitely.
So how do you self-care, I suppose?
You know, I go to where the love is. You know, at the end of the day.
Is it that simple?
For me, it's really that simple. But you know, I think, you know, I had to create that love. I had to create like this love village around me. I surround myself with people who are affirming and who love me, people who I've known since I was little, you know, from family and friends, and people and even like new friends, you know, who I've met in advocacy circles. You know, I make sure that I surround myself with these people. You know, at the end of the day, after a really hard day of like, you know, advocating or writing or online arguing with people, sometimes I just have to lay it down and come in the house and just, you know, sit next to my wife and, you know, crack open a beer and just like Netflix and chill. You know, sometimes it's just stopping, you know? And also I meditate every day. You know, I meditate every morning. I do yoga every morning. I try to eat really healthy just to keep my energy up and just to stay and have a clear head. You know, so it's kind of like everything that I do in my life is about self-care and is keeping my energy levels up and keeping myself inspired to continue to do the work.
Do you ever have any moments where you just don't want to do it anymore?
Yeah, all the time, but I have to bust through those moments.
What keeps you going?
You know, when I get to those places, I'll usually like reach out to a friend who I know can like give me some kind of affirmation or tell me that everything's going to be okay, or tell me that it's okay to just stop, you know, or, you know, emphasize to me how important it is the work that I'm doing and how there's nobody else is going to do it the way that I'm going to do it and that I have a purpose here, you know. I'm really invested in having a purposeful life. And sometimes that can be really, 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 really hard, you know, but, you know, I just have to go back to the people who really care about me and to kind of like lift me up, you know.
And you must encounter a lot, like you were talking about feedback. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about trans and queer people?
The biggest misconception around trans and queer people, the biggest misconception is really around trans people is that we are trying to deceive people. You know, that we are like playing dress up and we are out here trying to deceive, you know, straight people. And that's just so not true. Like
deceive them into what?
I don't know. Into our beds. I don't know, but it's like we're really not thinking about straight people like that or non-trans people like that. You know, trans folks, we are who we are. You know, particularly for trans women, that type of criticism is really leveled at trans women. And that's a larger conversation about how we interrogate femininity and people's entitlement to who a woman is and how a woman is to be in the world, you know, and that type of thinking is what perpetuates the violence, you know.
I thought it'd be more difficult for trans men.
Well, the thing I think for trans men is that we're really invisible. Like no one really even like pays trans men any attention. You know, a lot of the issues that are affecting trans men, whether it be through like, you know, our medical or legal issues or social issues, aren't really given a lot of space. A lot of that space is given to trans women, which I understand, you know, because, you know, they sit at a different intersection than we do. We're talking about, you know, dealing with like transphobia and sexism and misogyny. So like the misogyny part, I don't necessarily have to deal with in the world, you know? And also I think our transitions just look different, you know? So there's that, you know, but the biggest misconception is we are out here to deceive people. And what that does is that centers like non-trans people and like heterosexual people in our narratives. And it's like, you know, you have to get away, stop, you know, centering yourself on other people's narratives and allow your truth to be complicated, right? So I think what happens is you have these folks who center themselves in our lives and our narratives because they're starting to feel invalid. Well, if you can be a man, well, what does that mean for me? And if this is a woman, then is that a woman? Or I can't be a woman? It's like, it's not about you feeling invalidated. It's about you being complicated a little bit. So the things that you've always held true, just, you know, be open to having these truths complicated and expanding who you are. But this idea that we are deceiving the people is absolutely unequivocally false.
Do you think that as a society, we need to have a bigger conversation on gender?
Absolutely. And I think we are having a bigger conversation on gender. And the reason that we're having this larger conversation is because of the visibility of trans people. People like myself and Janet Mock and Laverne, who are great friends of mine who I love dearly, you know, us being our unapologetic selves, you know, our most unapologetic selves, and, you know, saying that we exist and starting to expand this spectrum of gender to something that's more than the strict binary system, but like a kaleidoscope or a spectrum of possibilities. And it's making people understand that there's a gendered experience. And the thing is that, you know, the gendered experience isn't just for transgender people. We all have a gendered experience. You have had a gendered experience. So now with trans people existing, people are like, oh, wow, well, let me start to think like, how has my gender played a role in who I am as a person, right? Like starting to think about what has been assigned to you, what has been expected of you, how people are perceiving you. And I think that's important. It's a very, very important conversation for us to have. And we have to have these conversations so that we can make more room for people who are differently gendered and make more language for people who are differently gendered. When we don't create space and language, then we make monsters out of people. And for too long, trans people have been the boogeyman. Right? And we're over being the boogeyman. We're just, you know, we just want to live and love and have opportunities to have a great life and have opportunities to have a livelihood and to live out our dreams. It's not really about anybody else but us trying to be our best selves.
And you said that you had a very supportive family.
Absolutely.
But within the Black community, you know, I'm not sure if it's a fact or if it has to do with race. You hear people saying that Black people within the Black community are more transphobic, they're more homophobic. In your experience, what's it been like?
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
Do you think that's based on racism, or like where
I definitely think it's a racist kind of construct. You know, from my personal experience, like I say, I come from a big Black family, big middle class family. My father is a mechanic. My mother was a nurse. You know, people who are from Georgia, from Tennessee, and they love me. And I have gay people in my family who they love. And I've talked to my 85-year-old grandmother. She tells me about, you know, the gay folks and trans folks that she knew, you know, growing up down in Memphis. You know, so I think that is a misconception, but I think, you know, the other conversation we have to have is around like how religion plays a part in communities, right? And how religion and the ferociousness of Christianity has taken hold of the Black community and what that looks like and how that creates like these constructs around
What's the impact?
Yeah, what's the impact, right? And we say this about Black people, but we're not talking about like the white folks, but I'm from the US, and we're not talking about like the white folks who are in our Congress who are creating these policies to keep transgender people out of bathrooms. We're not talking about the Phelps family. We're not talking about these evangelicals who are kicking their children out of their homes, who are creating these really like loveless communities around God and in their small towns, right? But we always want to level this criticism at Black people, and I think that it's wrong.
And also, too, some of the most visible advocates within the trans community, Laverne Cox, Janet Mock, yourself, all people who are Black.
Right, all people of color, right? And oftentimes what we see when we're in movements, right, in movements for equality and for inclusion, it is always the people of color who are on the front lines. And here we are again. Like, you know, this is something that we have been charged with. And I don't know if I don't think it's necessarily fair because we didn't create these systems, but we are the ones who are constantly, you know, brick by brick, you know, stick by stick, are, you know, tearing down, you know, these systems and trying to build up something new. You know?
How do you change within the, how do you change, I guess, regular people, people who might have these misconceptions, how do you get them to understand there is no difference?
You know, things like this, having these conversations, you know, it's really about having one-on-one conversations. But at the same time, I am not invested in having conversations with people who are invested in hating me, who just do not want to see my humanity, you know? And I like to believe that most people are good and most people want to be better and most people want to understand. So oftentimes it's just about having these conversations and really like centering the conversations around our core values, right? I think that all of us believe in justice and believe in love and believe in fairness, and that everybody, you know, should have equal opportunity to be their best selves, and nobody should be a victim of violence because of who they are. So if we're all good people and we think that, then there's space for us to have a conversation for you to understand my humanity and to have yours complicated a bit.
Now, I want to bring it back to your mom.
Yes.
What do you think your mom would say if she saw all the great work that you're doing right now?
Oh, she'd be so proud of me. My mom, she'd be so proud. I know she's proud of me now. I know she's with me every day. You know, when she passed away, it was right when I was doing a lot of TV stuff. And she was just so happy to see it. And she was trying to TiVo it or, you know, trying to DVR it or whatever. You know, she'd be really proud. And she wouldn't have missed a second. She would see this. She would see everything that I did. She would have read everything that I wrote. She would have been online arguing with people about her son, leave my baby alone. You know, yeah, she'd been in the thick of it.
And the book, when's the book supposed to come out?
Next year. Next year, yes.
And is it a memoir?
It's a memoir called Man of My Design, A Self-Determined Life. I'm in the thick of writing it now and going through my edits. It should be really good.
And you and Kim are doing a lot of talks?
Yes, me and Kim are doing a lot of talks. We just did a talk in London. We have another talk at the Human Rights Council of Canada, I think in September. Another talk at the University of Missouri. We're booking up all through the fall, which is going to be great.
Well, best of luck, and thank you so much for being here, Tiq.
Thank you so much.
It's been such a pleasure getting to talk to you, and hopefully soon I'll get to meet Kim in person. I creep her Instagram, I creep her Facebook, and I think Twitter. I creep all her social media, so you know.
Yes, hopefully very, very soon.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. Awesome.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.